So, it's finally here, 4 years in the making, Fantastic Beasts: The Secrets of Dumbledore, and overall, I thoroughly enjoyed this film. This is easily the best Fantastic Beasts film so far, and in fact, I enjoyed this film so much, I think I like it more than a Half-Blood Prince or a Deathly Hallows Part 1. I mean, it's not perfect, but as I was watching the film, I was just thoroughly enjoying myself. The film very much felt like it was trying to undo J.K. Rowling's mistakes in The Crimes of Grindelwald, and for the most part, most of the fixes work. It's just that some of the fixes it tries to do doesn't entirely work, more specifically with characters like Queenie. And when it comes to the Secrets of Dumbledore, I found the answers to the questions and or revelations to be satisfying. It's just that the way they decided to reveal such revelations just could have been done much better. For example, Credence or Aurelius, I mean, they kind of just dropped the Aurelius Dumbledore name, but Credence is Aberforth's son. I found that to be satisfying, and the sequence where Credence attacks Dumbledore and they fight was a really cool sequence. I mean, I love how Dumbledore in that sequence just wasn't really fighting him, because it just showed how powerful he really was, that Credence was going full force at Albus, and Albus was just barely doing anything. He was just blocking and dodging things and going out of the way. I was like, yeah, that is cool to show how powerful Dumbledore actually is. And then you get to the end of the action sequence, and Dumbledore beats Credence and then tells him that Grindelwald was manipulating him into turning against Dumbledore, which I found to be satisfying. But then he confusingly says, but we do share the same blood. And then they kind of just end the fight there and Dumbledore leaves, and I was like, hold on, wait, what? What's going on here? Because at the time I thought, oh, they're just gonna leave it at like that? Like, that's so unsatisfying. But then as the film goes on, we find that Credence is actually Aberforth's son, which again I found to be a satisfying answer. It's just that the film doesn't spend enough time with Aberforth and Credence. For the most part, the film just establishes that Aberforth and Credence have been communicating through mirrors, and that's sort of it. And another important secret and or revelation of Dumbledore in this film is the sequence where Albus tells Newt the story of his sister Ariana. And whilst I like the scene overall because the words Dumbledore is telling to Newt is pretty much word for word the lines Aberforth was telling Harry in the Deathly Hallows book, I was disappointed purely for the fact that I want to see this sequence. I don't just want it told to me, I want to see it now, because I've read the Harry Potter books, I know what happens, I want to visually see it. Like, the film is called The Secrets of Dumbledore, and they don't show probably the most important sequence in Dumbledore's life. Like, what? Like, please, are they saving this for the last film or something? Because it doesn't make any sense as to why they would, like, hold that information back to the audience. And don't get me wrong, I love the sequence. I love the way Jude Law performs the scene and Newt Scamander's reaction to said scene. And I love the moments where Newt is trying to console Dumbledore, and Dumbledore's just like, oh, Newt, please don't disappoint me. Please, your heart is so good, just don't disappoint me. Because obviously Newt is looking for the good in Dumbledore, but Dumbledore finds the act of what he did to Ariana so unforgivable. It's really strong writing, and the way Jude Law and Eddie Redmayne perform that scene, it's fantastic. It's just that I want to see the flashbacks of Ariana's death. Also, there are just a couple of sequences in this film that are really vague and unclear. The opening scene between Dumbledore and Grindelwald in the cafe, like, was that a dream? Was that a flashback? Was that a memory? The way the scene ends is so confusing because there's this weird bright light effect that we see in the final fight between Dumbledore and Grindelwald in this film. So it makes you think that this is some sort of parallel dream dimension thing. But then the muggles also disappear, and it's so confusing because the scene just ends and it cuts to Dumbledore in the Hog's head, and it's like, hold on, wait, what just happened? It was a really weird and confusing way to end the scene. Also, whilst the scene itself is good, it does contradict the fact that in Deathly Hallows, Dumbledore told Harry that the last time he saw Grindelwald was back in Godric's Hollow when Ariana died, and then they didn't see each other for several years until 1945, where Dumbledore beat him in the famous duel. Now, the main plot of this film revolves around this grand wizarding election, and for the longest time, I found it to be so confusing, particularly on the first watch. And then the second time around, I realized that the thing that they were actually voting for was the International Confederation of Wizards. And right there, I was like, why was that so vague? Like, if you're not a Harry Potter fan and you don't pick up on the words International Confederation, you'll be like, what are they actually voting for? I'm so confused. The way David Yates decides to present this information is so subtle that it is borderline confusing, and you're just like, wait, what are they actually voting for? And speaking of subtle, the fight between Dumbledore and Credence was done very subtly in the sense of Dumbledore and Credence were actually fighting inside the Deluminator. Again, the way David Yates decides to present the scene is just so confusing and subtle, and you kind of have to really be paying attention and know your Harry Potter knowledge to understand what's actually going on. You can tell it's the Deluminator because Dumbledore blows on this little water droplet, it goes through the window, hits Credence, and then there's a little light inside the droplet that goes into Credence and pops. And on the second time round, I understood what was happening because I was like, oh, this is the ball of light that Ron was talking about when he was separated from Harry and Hermione in Deathly Hallows. He then heard their voices coming from the Deluminator, he clicked it, the ball of light went inside him, and then whenever he apparated, he appeared wherever Harry and Hermione actually were. And so rewatching The Secrets of Dumbledore, I understood what was happening. And then when Dumbledore reveals to Credence during the fight that things aren't what they seem, and then he pins him down and uses the Deluminator to take them back into the real world, it's revealed that they are inside the Deluminator. But because the light coming from the Deluminator is so bright, you can't even tell what Dumbledore is actually holding. And the whole action sequence, whilst looking really cool, is just really confusing because for some weird reason, you feel like they entered the mirror dimension from the Marvel Universe. That's the way it feels like it's being presented on screen. Also, one thing I took issue with the first time around, but then I came around to on the second time, was Jacob's wand, because the trailer makes it look like Jacob's wand actually does some sort of magic in a sort of way, like it's been enchanted or something. But when you actually watch the film, his wand actually doesn't do anything, and on the second time round, I understood why his wand doesn't do anything. Dumbledore gave Jacob the wand just as a means to purely confuse Grindelwald, because the whole plan, Dumbledore's whole plan in the film is to confuse Grindelwald because Grindelwald is a seer and can see glimpses of the future, and so by giving Jacob a wand, it would confuse Grindelwald, and so I understand that, and I don't mind it now, but on first watch, I found that the fact that Jacob's wand did nothing was really confusing. Now, getting onto some of the stuff I absolutely loved in this film, Jude Law continues to be perfect as Dumbledore. There are so many sequences where you can see the internal pain and conflict inside Dumbledore, and he just plays it to perfection. You can really see it in scenes when he's talking to Grindelwald, or the scene where he is talking to Newt about Ariana's death. It's so well done. I love Jude Law in this film. He's perfect. I mean, one of my favorite scenes is the scene at the beginning when he's explaining to Newt and Theseus about the blood pact, and then he explains how every time he thinks about moving against Grindelwald, he can't because the chain wraps around his wrist and squeezes really hard. And the moment where the blood pact starts like scraping against the wall and the chain tightens around his forearm and he's like in so much pain, and Newt's just like, Albus, Albus, Albus. It was such a gripping scene. I loved it. And a really cool detail I noticed the first time around actually was when you see his forearm, you can see that there are actually chain marks on his wrist the whole time. So it just implies that he's been thinking about going against Grindelwald the whole time, even before this scene. And it's so great. It's such a good visual detail. Mads Mikkelsen as Grindelwald was perfect. Like, don't get me wrong, I really enjoyed Johnny Depp in The Crimes of Grindelwald. But for me, Mads Mikkelsen was so perfect, he should have just been Grindelwald from the very beginning. I've seen criticisms of people saying that Grindelwald was just written to be a generically evil bad guy in this film, and I mean, that is the point. People are like, oh, in The Crimes of Grindelwald, he said he wasn't a bad person. I'm like, yes, that's the point. He lied. He's a liar. That's what Grindelwald does. He makes himself look like he is better than he actually is. And so when in this film we actually see him, he's revealing his true colors. I mean, a really cool detail that I noticed in this film was that when he first receives the Chillin, he keeps forcing the Chillin to look at him in the eye so that it can judge him to be worthy so he doesn't actually have to kill it. But after multiple attempts of him trying to do that, he ends up realizing that the Chillin won't look at him, and so he kills it. That right there is really cool, nuanced detail, and I loved it. Eddie Redmayne as Newt Scamander is amazing as always. I thoroughly enjoyed him in this film, and I just love how this awkward magizoologist is supposed to be the leader of this team. I found it to be so amusing. I also really like how Eddie Redmayne plays Newt Scamander like he is on the autism spectrum, because it just explains a bit more to his character. Like, it adds so much to his character that it's actually made me soften my opinion on his performance in the first film, because in the first film I was like, why is he so awkward? Why is he so, like, quiet? Now realizing that he has autism, it actually makes a lot of sense, and it works really well for the character. Specifically, since he is neurodivergent, he just doesn't have good people skills, and so not only does it add to him being the leader of this group in this film, which is just really entertaining to see, but also it explains why he is so fixated and fond of animals. It's also nice to see Newt Scamander out and about in the field. Like, I loved how this film opens with him going to the rainforest to supervise the birth of the children. Like, that right there is stuff we should have seen in the first film, and we finally get it now, and I'm like, whilst it's too little too late, like, thank God we finally get it. Callum Turner is also good as Theseus Scamander, and one thing too that I really appreciate with his casting is just that he and Eddie actually look like brothers, and I find that to be a really nice touch. I also like their awkward sibling relationship. It really adds to the sequence where Newt has to rescue him from the evil German Geppetto with all the manticores. Like, that whole sequence was really fun. The manticore dance, it's great. It's good fun stuff. Dan Fogler, again, continues to be fantastic as Jacob Kowalski. He really is just one of the most valuable parts of these Fantastic Beasts films. Like, his bubbly, charismatic performance, it's really fun, really good fun comedic timing. I mean, one of my favorite bits is when he and Lally are at the big dinner party, and they're looking for the assassin, and Lally obviously spots the actual assassin, and then Jacob's just like, hey, Lally, the guy with the hair, I don't trust him. And Lally's just like, you think the assassin is the Norwegian Minister for Magic? Like, that was just really fun stuff. And speaking of Lally, I thoroughly enjoyed Jessica Williams as Lally Hicks. Granted, her accent, the little drawl she has, is a bit much and could have been toned down, but overall, I thoroughly enjoyed her performance in the film. I mean, she was bubbly and charming, and one of my favorite bits in the film actually is when she first meets Newt. Like, I love how the two of them just start complimenting one another and start geeking about each other's books. Like, I found that to be really wholesome and sweet. Though, I will say, whilst I enjoyed the overall sequence of Lally bringing Jacob back into the fight, I found the moment where she just starts telling Jacob the story of the past two films, basically recapping for the audience of the events of what happened in the past two Fantastic Beasts films, to be really on the nose and really unnecessary. Like, I've watched the films, you don't have to tell me what happened in those films, you don't have to recap it, I've seen them. It was very exposition heavy and pretty unnecessary. Like, if you wanted to do that, just shorten it a bit. I mean, Lally goes from plot point to plot point about their whole adventures in the first two films, and I'm like, we don't need this. You can just rewatch the other two films. Now, Ezra Miller as Credence, I can't really judge because I just needed more of Credence in this film, because whilst Ezra Miller plays the character very well, the character just isn't in the film very much, even though the character is quite important. I mean, for the most part, Credence's role in this film is basically just to attack Dumbledore, find that he is Aberforth's son, and pretty much just slowly start dying. And another character that I kind of needed more of was Queenie. I mean, again, Alison Sudol is great as Queenie, it's just that the way the character is written, specifically her character shift of going from evil to good again, was rushed, and it very much felt like Steve Kloves and J.K. Rowling, who wrote this film, were like, oh, whoops, J.K. made a mistake in the second film making Queenie turn evil, so we have to make her turn good by the end of it, basically undoing J.K.'s mistake in the second film. I don't know, it could have been done in a much cleaner way, just the way it's done in the film doesn't feel organic. That being said, I am happy that Queenie now is actually on the good side again, because her turn in the second film made no sense, and so whilst I will complain that the writing for her turn to the good side is rushed and inorganic, I don't mind it as much because it's them undoing a mistake that should have never been made. One thing that I did find kind of odd was Leta Lestrange's death isn't really felt in this film. Like, she has a couple of name drops, but characters like Theseus don't really feel anything about Leta's death, which is weird considering the time span from The Crimes of Grindelwald to this film was like a couple of months. Like, that is so weird. Why have the first three Fantastic Beasts films just been condensed down to a year? Like, when the line is dropped in this film that the events from the first Fantastic Beast to the third one has been a year, I was like, why is time moving so slowly? What? And that in itself just makes the Leta thing just feel awkward, because I mean, whilst we feel the effects of Leta's death on Yusuf, I mean, when Yusuf goes to Grindelwald and Grindelwald removes the memories of Leta from Yusuf's brain, that is horrifying and heart-wrenching. Like, imagining that happening to you is terrifying, and it's a good moment in the film. It's just that when it comes to the other characters mourning Leta, they don't. And it's weird because Theseus should be mourning Leta since she was his fiancée. And the thing is about this film is that I feel like they heavily rewrote the script, because I remember reports back in 2018 and 2019, in interviews, Dan Fogler said the next film was going to be a time jump, and then that it was pretty much going to be a war film. J.K. Rowling said something similar along those lines, and that it was going to be set in Brazil. But when you watch this film, and it only takes place a year after the first one, you're like, wait, huh? It didn't correlate, and so the whole first three films of the Fantastic Beasts films don't feel like there has been enough time that passes between each film and that the story is actually moving somewhere. And fear not, Newt and Tina fans, Katherine Waterston as Tina Goldstein is in the film. I mean, she's not in the film a lot, she is just pretty much a cameo, which is unfortunate because obviously there's behind the scenes drama as to why she didn't appear more into this film, but even still, her appearance is great. The ending scene where Jacob and Queenie get married is so wholesome and I love it. I mean, one of my favorite bits is when Newt is like panicking about the best man speech, and so he goes outside and he starts reciting his speech, and then he turns around and he sees Tina walking towards him. And oh my god, it was so wholesome. Their relationship romance is so good. I love it. It's just two awkward people who like each other very much, just being awkward, and it's so sweet and wholesome. Like, when the two of them eventually get married in the films, I will probably cry. Like, I love their relationship so much. And the thing that I love too is when Dumbledore shows up at the wedding and he's looking through the window, because it's so bittersweet. Because at this moment in time, Dumbledore has yet to do any of the morally grey and questionable things he does in the Harry Potter films. I mean, yes, he did the stuff in his youth, but still, at this moment in time, Dumbledore is pretty much a good man. He's a spreader of love and hope and faith. And just seeing this man looking at this, ceremony of love and realizing that this is something that he can't actually have is so tragic and heartbreaking. And I love the conversation he has with Newt at the end when Newt turns to him and he's just like, Dumbledore, if you ask of me, I will show up and I will help again. I love it. I love seeing Newt fully committed to the cause again. I mean, he should have been fully committed at the end of the first film, but still. And the thing that I find weird about The Secrets of Dumbledore is that, in a weird way, the film kind of is so self-contained and wraps up its story kind of neatly that if they don't make the rest of this 5-film franchise, if they don't make the next 2, it wouldn't be that bad. I mean, granted, I want to see this franchise fully played out, but if it's not in the cards, at least this is a somewhat satisfactory ending. Because, I mean, we did get a taste of Dumbledore and Grindelwald fighting when the blood pact breaks and then the two of them just enter this dimension and just start fighting. It's so cool. I mean, not only do you get the wizard sparks, but, like, there's a bit where they start doing this kind of, like, Matrix Kung Fu stuff with the wands. And it was really cool. I love the way it was done. And that's the thing. If we do end up getting the fight between Dumbledore and Grindelwald, I want it to be like this fight, but 5 times longer, but also implementing the much more grander magical aspects that we saw in the Voldemort and Dumbledore fight in Order of the Phoenix. Like, give me fire snakes, give me glass, give me water. I just want to see Dumbledore and Grindelwald go all at it, make it brutal, make it heartbreaking, because the stuff we saw in this film was cool, but I need it to be much bigger. And here's something too. I loved the cinematography in this film. In fact, I think this might be in my top 3 favorite looking Wizarding World films. Including the Harry Potter films, I loved the visual palette of The Secrets of Dumbledore. It was great. Granted, some of the visual effects in Hogwarts were quite disappointing, and that's purely because you could tell they were on a green screen, they weren't on actual location. I mean, that in itself kind of baffled me. Like, they couldn't have shut down the studio tour for like a day and filmed scenes in there. I mean, I know it was probably due to COVID and filming restrictions and all that, but still, the fact that most of the Hogwarts interior was just green screens was very disappointing. With that being said though, James Newton Howard's score is fantastic. It's always been fantastic. I love the Fantastic Beasts theme making a return, and the snippets of the Harry Potter score he implements into this score was so nostalgic. I mean, I know it's nostalgia bait, but I mean, come on, it's the Harry Potter music. Like, when they go into the Room of Requirement music and they're pretty much playing the music from Philosopher's Stone when they, cross the lake and they see Hogwarts for the first time, it's amazing. Like, come on, how could I not get goosebumps and chills from listening to that? And the weird thing about Fantastic Beasts: The Secrets of Dumbledore is that it seems like I'm in a minority, or at least I'm definitely in the camp that really likes and enjoys this film, because I've seen so much criticism of this film online, and a lot of it seems either unjustified and nitpicky, and it's like, am I now a defender of the Fantastic Beasts films? And look, I thoroughly enjoyed Fantastic Beasts: The Secrets of Dumbledore. And I won't lie, looking at the reactions this film has received, whether it be the reviews on Rotten Tomatoes or just the reviews in general, it seems like a lot of the backlash towards this film has been very negative and either doesn't relate to the film itself, or the people reviewing it just don't like the Harry Potter universe. For example, I watched the IGN review, and granted, I don't put a lot of stock in IGN's reviews, but still, I wanted to hear what they were saying. It just seemed like the person reviewing the film didn't even care for the Harry Potter universe, and started complaining about things like the Chillin' and how they're just like, why is this magical animal picking the world leader to such a dumb and flawed system? I'm like, you clearly just don't like the Harry Potter universe, because in the Harry Potter books and films, you have things like the sorting hat that picks people's, houses in Hogwarts, and then not only that, there is a fairy tale in the Wizarding World universe called The Wizard and His Hopping Pot, and it's this cautionary tale of this wizard whose father used to be a really strong healer, and people used to go for him for everything, and then his father died, and the son didn't care and didn't want to help the people. And then the cauldron pretty much teaches the son a lesson of like, you have to help people, it's part of your obligation and your duty. And in order to persuade the son, the cauldron starts manifesting all the diseases people in the village are getting, it grows an extra leg and starts hopping, and it makes a really annoying clanging noise, and by the end of the tale, the son realizes that he actually has to start helping the people. That right there is a very Wizarding World thing, and so things like the Chillin', a creature that can look at you and tell if you are of pure heart, that right there is a very fantastical Harry Potter thing that fits within the universe, and so complaining about it is just stupid and a massive nitpick. And look, I'm not saying you can't like this film. I mean, if you didn't like it, that's fine. But what I'm saying is people are just being unnecessarily harsh about this film, particularly because of the J.K. Rowling controversy, and it's like, I don't know, like, the film isn't that bad whether or not you like J.K. Rowling. And look, I'm not saying you can't dislike the film. If you didn't like it, you didn't like it. But the people that have basically been complaining about the film on Twitter, or that actually haven't even seen the film, or just, like, expecting this film to fail anyway just because they don't like J.K. Rowling, is so stupid. Like, go into the film and see it for yourself, and if you like it, you like it. If you don't like it, you don't like it. Don't be a person that is just complaining and being negative for the sake of being negative when you haven't actually seen the thing itself. And that's the thing. All the negativity is just like, oh, the franchise is dead. Oh, everyone hates J.K. Rowling. They should just scrap all these movies. And I'm like, no, this is a good film. I watched it and I was excited to see the next two because I want to see the next two. And our Warner Brothers are waiting to see how this film performs financially. And if it doesn't perform, we won't get the next two. And that's the end of the franchise. And it's like, man, this kind of sucks. This film is in a really, really weird and tough situation. But regardless of all the economics and politics and controversy surrounding this film, I'm just going to leave it with this. I thoroughly enjoyed this film, and I can't wait to see the next two if they ever get made. But what did you guys think about Fantastic Beasts: The Secrets of Dumbledore? Let me know in the comments down below. Like, subscribe, follow me on social media, all that good stuff. And until we meet again, see you guys next time.